everybody. Welcome to this week's episode of News for Normies. I am Millennial Meditations, your host, bringing you a week's worth of news in a relatively short time frame. If you enjoy this content, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, share with your normie friends, especially those who are more invested in their football team than they are about what politicians are doing with their money and their votes. And that'll come up, later in this podcast episode. Also, I forgot to mention this in the past couple episodes, but I have references for everything I talk about down below. That way you can verify that I'm not just making things up and coming up with things out of thin air. So, if you're on YouTube, go follow me on Rumble, because Rumble is a better platform overall. They like people like me, so go support them if you are like me. Alright, so I have to correct my record about one thing I said last week, unlike mainstream news sources. In last week's video, I quickly stated that Alex Preddy, the man who was shot by Border Patrol, attempted to draw his gun and was subsequently shot for that. Turns out the situation was much more complex than I originally thought, and I knew better than to talk about it when I did. So here I am correcting the record, unlike MSNBC. So here is a slow motion video of the altercation between Alex Preddy and Border Patrol. So with all of that going on, the normal speed videos, different angles, all this stuff, people on X were saying that he attempted to reach for his gun, which I said last week. But if you watch it again, it appears that the Border Patrol agent attempted to remove the gun from Preddy's holster. It looked like he had it in the small of his back, which I would say is not a good place to carry, but to each their own. Also, he had his CCW license, so he was more than legally justified to be carrying that day. That'll come up again later as well. So he got into it with Border Patrol. They had him subdued, tried to remove the gun, and then he was shot. Apparently, Preddy was also carrying a Sig Sauer P320, which has been known to have negligent discharges in the past. I am not saying that the gun actually did go off on its own. I'm just saying that model has had issues in the past. So it's possible, very possible, that that gun went off as the Border Patrol agent tried to remove it. Then everybody else got spooked and bang, 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 bang. And then Preddy was dead. So that's a possibility, not saying that is for sure. Regardless, though, he was subdued and disarmed by law enforcement. To which I now say he should not have been shot for that. Now, I'm not saying that Alex Preddy was a saint either, like corporate media did, because here he is roughly 11 days prior fighting with police.
This is a moment the news movement filmed on January 13th in Minneapolis, showing a man who appears to be Alex Preddy interacting with federal immigration agents 11 days before Border Patrol shot and killed him. Our footage was analyzed by the BBC, whose facial recognition technology confirmed his identity to a 97% degree of accuracy. On the morning of January 13th, our team received a tip that federal agents were blocking a street at the corner of East 36 and Park Avenue in Minneapolis. We arrived around 10:15 a.m. We saw observers shouting at the agents as they walked back to their vehicles. When they started driving away, the man kicked their taillight. An agent then got out of the vehicle, grabbed him, and pushed him to the ground. During the altercation, agents fired tear gas and pepper balls into the crowd. They continued to hold the man down before they retreat and he walks away. The man in our footage is wearing a similar outfit to what Preddy was wearing on the day he was killed. What appears to be a gun is also visible above his waistband. Here, he continues to stand at the scene. On the day he was killed, the Department of Homeland Security claims Preddy, a 37-year-old ICU nurse, approached officers holding a handgun. That claim has been contradicted by analysis of bystander videos from multiple news investigations, which concluded that Preddy was holding a phone, not a gun, when he was pinned to the street. Shortly after the altercation we filmed here on January 13th, federal agents drove away. Soon after that, we left the scene.
So everything he did there is a no-no when you go through your CCW class. When you go through a CCW class, Concealed Carry Weapons class, or CCP, CHL, whatever you want to call it, when you go through the course to get your concealed carry license, you are always told, do not instigate problems no matter where you are. If you are pulled over by police, keep your hands at 10 and 2 on the steering wheel, have your license, registration, insurance ready before the cops even walk up. And in some states, this is required. In other states, it's not, but I still think it's a good idea to do so. In some states, you are required to inform law enforcement that you have your CCW license and that you are carrying at that time. Other states, you do not have to, but I think it's a good idea just to let everybody know what's going on. That's just my opinion, not legal advice. So everything Alex Preddy did there went against all of those things that were taught when you get your CCW. He was actively instigating with police, fighting with law enforcement. He kicked a car, which is destruction of property. So he ain't no saint. And why he wasn't arrested that day is beyond me. If he was, he probably would still be alive, and we wouldn't even be talking about him. So in conclusion, I do not think Preddy should have been shot, but he was not a shining angel that the media says he was. And if I had a daughter, I definitely wouldn't want her dating someone like him. And also, since I mentioned corporate media and MSNBC or MS Now, whatever they're going by, here is MS Now giving him a post-mortem glow-up that they used to report about him. And you can see on the original, on the left, that he was very scrawny, a little pale. On the right, they kind of beefed him up a little bit, gave him more of a tan, fixed his teeth, gave him a little bit thicker jawline, kind of gave him the a Chad look, if you will. So they kind of did the exact opposite of what they did with Joe Rogan here in this one. And then here's a clip of them actually using the enhanced photo to, gain more sympathy for him.
This time it was 37-year-old Alex Preddy, an ICU nurse who cared for veterans. Donald Trump and his cabinet, his administration, are demanding once again that you not believe your eyes and ears.
So there you have it. Corporate media basically lying in this case about his looks and, trying to garner political points for their side. This is a prime example of why I do this podcast, to cut through the bullshit and tell you what's really going on. And that's why I say share with your normies, because they probably won't get this kind of information anywhere else. Now, I got to talk shit about Trump and Kash Patel. And I know that's ironic because I'm wearing a t-shirt with Trump's face on it. That'll become relevant later. First, here's President Trump spouting blatantly unconstitutional views. So if you couldn't hear that, he said, quote, "You can't have guns, you can't walk in with guns, it's a very unfortunate thing," end quote, which was in regard to Alex Preddy at that protest, but whatever. And then here is Kash Patel pretty much saying the exact same thing.
Of Border Patrol, what can you tell us?
Great to be with you, Maria. And look, Secretary Noem stated it perfectly. You do not get to attack law enforcement officials in this country without any repercussions. You do not get to do that in Minnesota, LA, or anywhere else. And the interagency is leading the charge out there. We've already arrested with the interagency those that violated the FACE Act and impeded a peaceful prayer in church. We've already just last night arrested 4 more individuals involved in the damage of government property that we saw the videos of online. We've arrested other individuals who've made threats to law enforcement online. So we are not messing around. It doesn't have to be in person. If you threaten law enforcement officials or civilians, we are going to come find you. And as for this latest shooting, yes, DHS and HSI are the lead, and the FBI is processing the physical evidence. So we're in possession of the firearm, which is going to go to our laboratory. But as Secretary Noem said, no one who wants to be peaceful shows up at a protest with a firearm that is loaded with 2 full magazines. That is not a peaceful protest, and you do not get to touch law enforcement. You do that anywhere, this FBI is going to be leading the charge to arrest those.
But how was he threatening Border Patrol? You've collected the evidence, you said, right? You have the handgun in your possession?
That's right.
And how was he using that handgun in terms of threatening Border Patrol? What was the threat? He had his camera, right? He was filming it.
That's something that I will let the DHS and the prosecutors, because they are the ones investigating that case. I don't want to stylize that evidence, but I trust the men and women on the ground who are trained professionals to only use it when it's absolutely necessary. And I trust Secretary Noem's leadership and DHS and HSI to do the right thing, as they've always done in these scenarios.
So, sorry, Kash. There's nothing in the Constitution that states that you can only exercise one right at a time. This is blatantly false, and if they haven't retracted these statements, they should. Finally, of all people, the fat electrician chimed in on this, and I couldn't agree more. He posted on X, quote, "Complete bullshit. 99.99% of people lawfully carrying are doing so to defend themselves and others. He was in a highly populated area. It's completely logical to bring extra ammo. I've done it, and most of my friends have done it. None of us were planning to do anything, we were just preparing for the worst. The amount of ammo and optic aren't evidence of anything, especially intent. If you have real evidence, use the real evidence. The Democrat, 'his gun is extra scary' talking point isn't one you get to use as the pro 2A side, especially for a Mall Ninja Edition SIG P320. And I couldn't agree more. I regularly carry my Glock 43X that has an optic and a spare magazine with me, almost everywhere I go, especially to large outdoor public gatherings because crazies hide among us. Kash Patel received significant pushback for this remark, with the NRA actually coming out against him, which took myself and the entire gun rights crowd by surprise. And this is their post on X in regards to this whole thing. And if you are surprised by me saying that, look into the history of the NRA. Long story short, they are not a gun rights group, and I think they actually started as like a group to train people to be better shots. It was right after the Civil War. And the NRA actually backed Trump's bump stock ban in his first term, which I was very critical of. And also, if you're a regular fan of my podcast, you may notice I have a slightly different take on this than with Renee Good. That instance was pretty cut and dry. She tried to hit the ICE agent with her car, which she did, as you saw when, that happened. I showed you all the videos of that one. And she got shot. She tried to kill a police officer, and she got shot in the process. Pretty cut and dry. Also, Mayor Fry came out shortly after and admitted that he had severe bruising and internal bleeding from getting hit, because that just doesn't happen from waking up and stepping out of bed. The case with Preddy is a little different because he was ultimately unarmed when he was shot, so I can't fully side with the law enforcement on this one. And as I told a friend of mine who is probably watching this right now, I largely like what the Trump administration is doing with foreign policy, but the domestic stuff is pathetic. Kash Patel is a flat out liar, not even going to get on the whole Epstein stuff, which I heard that there was more evidence and files put out and da-da-da. I just don't care at this point. I don't care. I don't. Dan Bongino got compromised, and we saw that because he resigned within a year of him, being in second in charge there. Pam Bondi is incompetent and cares more about her airtime on Fox News than actually doing her job. And speaking of gun rights, she was all for red flag laws when she was Attorney General of Florida. So I talked about that in the past, not going to rehash all that now. And Trump touts about the economy here in the U.S., yet our bills are still the same. My utility bill for this past month was $325 for a sub 1,000 square foot house. Yeah, and on top of all that, you've got all this chaos in Minnesota that isn't being cracked down, even though you can't tell me that the FBI doesn't know who's organizing this stuff. And that leads us right into our next story here, right after I take a drink. Okay, so leading up to the shooting of Alex Preddy, a complex network of Marxists has been communicating on apps like Signal to share the locations of ICE operations. According to Scott McKay at the American Spectator, quote, an organized army of protesters like Alex Preddy and Renee Good, the woman shot 3 weeks ago by an ICE agent she hit with her car, are following ICE agents around and interfering with them as they arrest illegal alien criminals. There are communications networks like the Signal chat organized by Minnesota's own Lieutenant Governor, the nose-ringed leftist Peggy Flanagan, which dispatch protesters to the scenes of ICE arrests when they're detected. End quote. So yeah, there you go. You got the second in charge of the state of Minnesota who's involved in the organization of these protests when ICE is trying to remove people who, at the bare minimum, are stealing from the government, i.e. taxpayers, or at worst committing violent crimes against people, yet these protesters are there trying to defend them? Okay. Also, according to Data Republican on X, the protesters in Minnesota are being funded by foreign sources. So you can see here at first, Data Republican, gives some details about them and who they are and where they started from. And then in the second picture here is some of the, circumstantial evidence that Data Republican put forward. So, Data Republican, if you are somehow watching this, thank you for doing this work. I greatly appreciate it. And as I've constantly stated over and over, how is it that regular people on the internet can find this shit out, yet the Federal Bureau of Investigation, which is what they're supposed to do, can't make arrests on people organizing this stuff? It's almost as if the feds want the chaos to keep going and keep going and keep going, so that way they can usher in a police state. If Nick Shirley can go and uncover $9 billion worth of fraud with just him and a buddy and a camera, there's no way that the FBI didn't know that shit was going on. If Data Republican can put all this stuff together and put it on the internet, there is no way that the FBI didn't know this was going on. You cannot convince me otherwise of that. And that's why I said when Trump was first elected, I support I'm glad it happened, and I support what they were doing at the time, but don't put all your faith in the government because they will always let you down. All right. Moving on. This is a quick one. An HSI officer had the tip of his finger bitten off in Minnesota while dealing with, rabid communist lunatics there. Two people were arrested in relation to this, and at this time it is unclear if he will lose the entire finger. I don't know if I doubt that the tip that was bitten off is going to be reattached, but if he was treated early enough, I think he'll be okay. And speaking of losing digits, a communist protester had her fingers blown off when she grabbed a flashbang at a protest.
Medic.
Oh my god. Oh my god. Oh my god.
Oh my god.
Oh my god.
Now, rumors are speculating that she is trying to sue the Trump administration over this, but, I say play stupid games, win stupid prizes. There's another saying going around, FAFO, FAFO, y'all know what that means. Now, why this person is still in the country is beyond me, but, we've got to talk about it since it happened. Ilhan Omar was sprayed with apple cider vinegar at a town hall recently.
Abolishment of the agency. ICE cannot be reformed. It cannot be rehabilitated. We must abolish ICE for good. And DHS Secretary Kristi Noem must resign or face impeachment.
Now, it goes without saying that behavior like this should be condemned, and I am like 99.99% sure that the dude that did that got arrested. But if I have to be honest, the left has gotten us all to this point. For the last 10 years, the left has said it's okay to be violent against Republicans, with Democrat politicians like Maxine Waters saying, get in their faces and make them feel uncomfortable, cause a scene, blah, 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 as seen here.
Let's stay the course. Let's make sure we show up wherever we have to show up. And if you see anybody from that cabinet in a restaurant, in a department store, at a gasoline station, you get out and you create a crowd. And you push back on them. And you tell them they're not welcome anymore, anywhere.
And on top of this, you had the whole punch a Nazi trend there for a while, where people were just getting randomly assaulted in the streets because they were a Nazi. Oh yeah, and how could I forget, back in October of last year, the entirety of the Democrat base celebrated when Charlie Kirk was murdered for his political views, with 0 Democrat politicians calling out their own side. Actually, let me rephrase that. You had John Fetterman. He was the only Democrat politician that called out Democrats for their violent rhetoric like that. Everybody else was completely silent about the Democrat Party being the violent ones. Also, some people, myself included, say that this little stunt was set up beforehand. And here's why. Most people who get sprayed by a random substance like that are immediately removed from the situation and given medical treatment because you don't know what that is. It could just be water. It could be, milk. It could be bacon grease. It could be innocuous, or it could be some form of acid that can dissolve your skin and tissue. So when you don't know what it is, most people are taken off of the scene immediately and transported to a hospital to get medical care. And then if they find out it's innocuous later, it's like, well, okay, it wasn't that bad, so you got lucky. On top of that, she looked right at that guy and nodded. She, if you watch it again, she kind of did this. And then he immediately popped up and ran at her and sprayed her with the stuff. So that looked like a nonverbal cue to me, like, yeah, go ahead and do it, and then we're going to let this play out. So I think it was a setup to gain sympathy for her own, political sake, but I don't know. Let me know your thoughts down below. All right. Tom Homan, the border czar, is now in Minneapolis, taking the place of Greg Bavino, and held a press conference when he got there. This is a clip from the press conference that I think is the most pressing of the entire thing.
Well, first of all, about the organization and the funding of the attacks on ICE. I'm not going to answer a lot about that because I'm not going to show our hand, but they'll be held accountable. Justice is coming. Again, we got to all remember why the questions we've seen and why we're here. What started this? 4 years of an open border, where millions of people are letting this country unvetted. Remember, let's not forget, for 4 years we were told the border was secure. 4 years we were told the border was secure, and we all knew it wasn't. And I want this to be a positive thing we're doing here today. I also want to remember the politicians are continually attacking us. Where were they the last 4 years when the number of women and children sex trafficking went all-time high? Where were they when 250,000 Americans died from fentanyl coming across the border? Where were they when women and children are dying making that journey? Where were they when over 4,000 families making that journey died? Historic record. Where were they? Not a word. Now we're just trying to respond to what happened the last 4 years and keeping this country safe. And we're arresting a lot of public safety threats, take them off the streets, which make this country safer. President Trump promised to make this country safe again, and that's what we're doing. But my 2.5 days up here, we made a lot of progress. I think everybody agrees on the criminal and public safety threats. They agree it's much safer and easier to arrest an alien in a facility than send a whole team out in the field that's going to draw anger, because now we got to send a bunch of people to do something that could have been done by 1 or 2 people.
So it seems as if the Trump administration is trying to use a softer tone in enforcing immigration policy while still maintaining the fact that a lot of people got to get deported. However, this will not stop the commies who are trying to impede federal law enforcement. They will always hate Trump no matter what he does, and will use any kind of propaganda against him to further their communist agenda. So, in my opinion, the Trump administration should have cracked down harder on this and snuffed this out before it could get any worse, even though it's already gotten pretty bad. So, yeah. And if you want proof of these commies, well, here's the next story. Molly Ringwald, who's a has-been actress, says MAGA will be found guilty of treason when Democrats regain power.
I don't think that I need to remind you, I'll just give a little history lesson here quick. But, if you look at what happened in France, where I lived for a few years in my 20s, they were taken over by the Nazis. They were invaded, they were taken over, and a lot of people collaborated. And then there were people that did not collaborate and were part of the resistance. Eventually, they got their country back, and those people who collaborated were found to be criminal. And that is what's going to happen. I mean, you should not support what is going on just because these are human beings, and we are human beings, and we cannot forget our humanity. But if you don't care about that, if you only care about yourself, then realize that you are going to be seen as a collaborationist.
So first off, Molly, you wouldn't be able to criticize the government under a fascist system, otherwise you'd just immediately be arrested. Kind of like what they're doing in the UK. And second, it's collaborator, not collaborationist, so get it right next time. And finally, it's very funny to me, the timing of this, because she made this video as she's trying to promote a new film that's coming out soon, which I will not name, nor will I watch, because I firmly believe we have to fight with our dollars. If you want people like this to change, quit giving them your money. End of story. And speaking of commies, I think I talked about this guy before, but he's popped back up now. Ohio Attorney General candidate Elliot Forhan says he wants to kill President Donald Trump.
Hi, this is Elliot Forhan, candidate for Ohio Attorney General. I want to tell you what I mean when I say that I am going to kill Donald Trump. I mean, I'm going to obtain a conviction rendered by a jury of his peers at a standard of proof beyond a reasonable doubt, based on evidence presented at a trial conducted in accordance with the requirements of due process, resulting in a sentence duly executed of capital punishment. That is what I mean when I say that I'm going to kill Donald Trump.
So if you are like me and you are an Ohio resident, this could be our Attorney General, and this is very reminiscent of what just happened in Virginia. Do not forget that Virginia just elected basically all commies, and their Attorney General, what's his name, Jay Jones? I think it was his name. Anyway, you could find it. More importantly, he said before he was elected that he wanted the children of Republicans that he was up against to die so that way they could further gun control laws. Let me repeat that again. The now Attorney General of the state of Virginia previously stated that he wanted Republicans' children to die so they could implement gun control laws. That is flat out fucking evil, and he should be in prison for that. And if you don't want that kind of stuff here in Ohio, I suggest you share this with other friends of yours in Ohio, because this guy could be our next Attorney General. So get out and vote. Anytime that you can go out and vote, vote. Seriously. And finally, believe these commies when they say stuff like this because they mean it, and send this to some of your normie friends who watch, more Ohio State football or the Bengals lose every week than paying attention to what's going on around them. Yes, I am calling out professional sports because, in my opinion, it is the modern day equivalent of bread circuses. Now, to give some praise to the FBI, the FBI raided an election center in Fulton County, Georgia, as investigations are ongoing into potential violations of federal laws related to, quote, preservation of election records and intimidation or defrauding voters, end quote, according to the Blaze media. Democrats are, no surprise here, freaking out over this because of, this video clip here.
So now they're going to start pulling these ballots out from under this table. This table, the black one, was placed there by the lady with the blonde braids at about 8:22 a.m. in the morning. So she put that table there. So the same person who's staying behind now, the same person who cleared the place out under the pretense that we're going to stop counting, is the person who put the table there at 8:22 in the morning. Yeah, I saw 4 suitcases come out from underneath the table. Yeah, upper right hand, you see the gentleman in the red. So he just pulled one out. So what are these ballots doing there, separate from all the other ballots? And why are they only counting them whenever the place is cleared out with no witnesses? Is the question. So these machines can process about 3,000 ballots an hour. You have multiple machines there, and they're there for 2 hours. So you do the math. How many ballots went through those machines in those 2 hours when there was no one there to supervise, to be present, consistent with your statutes and rules, to supervise the tabulation? We believe that could easily be, and probably is certainly, beyond the margin of victory in this race. Because if it's only 3 scanners working for 2 hours, right, that's 18,000 ballots that went through. So we're now at 11:09. There were, in addition to the 4 workers that you see there There were two other people who were bringing ballots in and out. The gentleman in red that you saw, and then a second person. I can't tell if it's a male or female based on their hair being pulled back in their mask, but in any event, that's 6 total people. And so if we were to sit here for the next 2 hours, what we would see is that this operation just goes on and on and on. They're scanning until about 12:55 in the morning. So we kept the video running. And, we can show you the people who gave us the affidavits reappearing at that time, just as they said, around 1 a.m. to find out, are they in fact counting after they told us they would stop working or not? And we will fast forward to that. But have you all seen as much as you'd like to see of what's happening here?
I think so.
I think you basically get the idea.
Unless any member wants to see more.
Or you have any questions?
No, let's go ahead.
Okay. So let's fast forward to about 12:55 in the morning.
Yeah, so you remember when Donald Trump called there and said that they needed to find him like nearly 12,000 votes, and then after Biden was elected, Fani Willis tried to put him in prison for election interference? Yeah. Seems like there was some truth to that. Now, in the end of all this, several politicians and prosecutors need to be arrested themselves, including but not limited to Brian Kemp, the governor of the state of Georgia, who vehemently opposed Trump investigating the 2020 election at that time. So, again, Cash, quit talking and make some arrests. That's what we want to see. And if the Republicans want to win the midterms, you better get on board with this too. Because people like myself are tired of all the talk and want to see some high-profile arrests. And if you're a Republican and you're like, oh, we shouldn't set the precedent, motherfucker, the precedent has already been set. The left already tried to kill and arrest Donald Trump, and all the people from J6 who were nonviolent, and all these other things I've talked about before. The precedent has already been set. So we need to correct this, otherwise the Republicans are going to lose. Now, speaking of high-profile arrests, Don Lemon was arrested this week for his involvement in storming the city's church in Minnesota, and the indictment for his arrest was unsealed, as seen in this clip here.
What do you think of this? I mean, this is unacceptable. It's shameful. It's shameful to interrupt a public gathering of Christians in worship.
But there were folks who will...
I have to take care of my flock.
Okay, but listen, we live in there's a constitution in the First Amendment to freedom of speech and freedom to assemble and protest.
Yeah. We're here to worship. We're here to worship Jesus because that's the hope of these cities. That's the hope of the world is Jesus Christ.
I want to be very respectful. Please don't push me though.
We're here to worship Jesus. Yes. That's why we're here. Yes. Okay, that's why we're here. Okay. That's what we're about.
Don't you think Jesus would be understanding
we're about
and love these folks?
We're about spreading the love of Jesus.
But did you try to talk to them as a Christian?
No one is willing to talk.
Okay.
I have to take care of my church and my family, so I asked that you actually would also leave this building.
You don't want us to chronicle what happened?
Unless you're here to worship.
I'm always worship. I'm a Christian.
We're here to worship. Yeah. We're here to worship. Okay.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
So as you can see on that indictment paperwork, 3 other people were arrested along with Don Lemon: Traherne Jean Cruz, Georgia Fort, and Jamil Lydell Lundy. However, by the time I'm recording this, Don Lemon was released without bail. Anyone who's crying about this but said nothing about those arrested during J6 is a hypocrite, because, as I've stated before, most people there were peaceful. Also, how is this here not an admission of guilt?
Into Minneapolis a little bit ago and did some reconnaissance on the ground, speaking to an organization there that's gearing up for resistance and protest. I've been pleasantly surprised to see the community coming together. Diverse community. If you see this, when we first pulled up, we're like, wait a minute, which operation are we at? And as it turns out, because we were like, well, this is kind of MAGA coded, right? Saw the American flag or whatever, but these are resistance protesters. They're planning an operation that we're going to follow them on. I can't tell you exactly what they're doing, but it's called Operation Pull Up. And it's Takima Armstrong, and she has been doing this since George Floyd, Dante Wright, and others, where they surprise people, catch them off guard, and hold them to account. And so that's what we're doing here. And then after we do this operation, you'll see it live. And these operations are surprise operations. Again, I can't tell you where.
And that video clip right there was from before their group stormed the church. So hopefully he'll be put in prison for a long time, but we'll see if that actually happens. Speaking of commies, been talking about a lot of commies this week. Zohran Mamdani says that New York City is broke and they gotta reallocate some funds.
We are speaking about a fiscal crisis at the scale greater than the Great Recession. And so there will not be one single thing that can answer that crisis. It will require us to pursue every single avenue. That means looking inward into savings and efficiencies. That also means raising taxes on the wealthiest New Yorkers and the most profitable corporations. And it means recalibrating the relationship with the state.
So maybe, just maybe, if your city wasn't hemorrhaging money to house illegal aliens, you might have some money left over. Also, nobody wants to pay taxes regardless of how much money they have. So by increasing taxes on the wealthiest people, they will leave for states with better tax policies. Then the next wealthiest people will get taxed, and they may not have the means to leave, so then they're just going to have all their wealth taxed, and so on until everyone is having most of their money stolen by the government. And then you get communism. It's almost like people like myself were warning about this beforehand. And again, if you leave New York City, leave your shitty politics there too, because we don't want them here. And I love it anytime I get to dunk on this dude. Hassan Piker, avowed communist and, who traveled to China to praise communism, received his 7th suspension from Twitch for using anti-Semitic phrases while on a live stream. It's currently unclear how long he will be banned for, but right now it seems like he has a 7-day ban. You would think that after being banned 7 times, they would just ban him outright, but, it says a lot about the parent company of Twitch. However, if you want to support, non-communists, go follow me on Twitch. It's linked down below. Try to do some gaming every once in a while. And coming to an end here, Google recently paid out $68 million in a class action lawsuit for allegedly recording people's conversations. This is a pittance in comparison to what they make annually, and this reminds me a lot of the lawsuits against big pharmaceutical companies when their products are found to cause more harm than good, or when they straight up lie to the FDA about the addictiveness of their products. Looking at you, Sackler family, for the opioid crisis. And along with this, excuse me, throat's getting dry. And along with this, lawsuits are currently going on against social media outlets like Meta, TikTok, and YouTube for teen addiction. This lawsuit alleges that social media platforms have contributed to mental health issues in minors, as the platforms have been alleged to be intentionally addictive, with their algorithms and what people see, similar to, gambling games at casinos, like slot machines and stuff. So while I can see the logic here, it's also incumbent on parents to monitor what their kids do online. I know when I was growing up, we had a family computer and, my parents watched what we did. I know it's a lot different now, but there are ways to do it. So, take that with, for what you will. And with that being said, I'm going to wrap up here. If I missed anything important that you think I should have covered, let me know, and I'll talk about it next week. And with all that being said, I will see you then. Take care.